Okay, so today's video is going to be a little long, but I think it's worth your time. I will be talking about building a timeless luxury brand. Now, of course, building a timeless luxury brand is a huge topic, right? It's not something that can be sort of put together or talked about in a 10 or 15-minute video, right? It's more to do with a long-term prospect. But in this video, I just want to talk about 2 or 3 examples and show you some kind of actionable tips that can then take you from or your brand from where it is into being a luxury brand. Now, don't get me wrong. A luxury brand, the common misconception or the common myth about luxury brands is that they're like, Louis Vuitton, Burberry, and Gucci. Yes, they are. And in fact, the examples I give today are going to be that, Versace and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that any brand can be a luxury brand because a luxury brand is not defined by the price of their products or services. It is defined by the kind of emotional feeling that the customers get out of that brand. So even a $10 or $50 kind of product or service can be a luxury brand if you're giving this ultimate kind of experience to your customers. Now, of course, I understand $10, $50 sounds like, ridiculous, right? How could a $10 brand be, a luxury brand, right? But let's dig into some examples. Let's look at, I've written this article, some time ago, and I want to use that article as a base. So I'm going to show you the screen and we'll go through the article and I will explain. So hopefully you won't feel that you're just reading it, that I'm just reading it, but rather we will discuss. So I'll try to comment back and forth and give you some insights into that. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so this is the article that I've written. It's called The Power to Endure, Lessons from Venerable Luxury Fashion Brands, right? So if you look at venerable brands such as, Versace, Burberry, and Gucci, these are the 3 examples that I've taken. Often they struggle to connect to emerging markets, right? But successful brands turn this into an opportunity to remind young consumers why they were successful in the first place. In the process, they often introduce young consumers to a standard of quality that they are not accustomed to, right? Brands that survive don't reinvent themselves, they reintroduce themselves. Wow. Okay, so that is a powerful concept. So the same with your brand. If you've been in business or even if you're starting out, don't sort of reinvent, don't think about reinvention, but think about reintroduction, right? So you want to reintroduce your brand to your audience and to a newer audience, to a younger audience maybe, or to an older audience, whatever it is, a different set of audience. Because the biggest problem with brands these days is that they sort of, they base themselves on a very, very narrow view of themselves. Now I know I advocate focus, focus in terms of strategy, but not in terms of how you perceive yourself. All right? Okay, so let's look at the next thing. Okay, I took the example of Versace, and really, I will leave a link to this article and you can read all about it, but let's just get to what we can learn from Versace, right? So Versace, I think his collections gave rise to the supermodel. And I think that's where, so it's something that you bring out into your market that the others are not doing. Now this is something that you can learn from Versace and from a lot of the other brands. Now in terms of takeaways, number 1, build your network, right? Because Rome wasn't built in a day. So you need to build a network. And, you aren't good at anything, so you need to delegate. So this networking, and you know what, I'm guilty of this. I try to do everything. Like, for example, I am the brand ambassador for my agency. I'm the face of that brand, and you will see all the videos. I appear in those videos. And that's because I love doing this, number one. I love communicating. I love educating and sharing information. But also because I wanted to keep it consistent, and I want to dedicate my time towards that. And just like that, there may be things that you want to dedicate your life to in terms of your business life, but also you can think about delegating, right? Okay. Next is understand the power of personal branding. Now, Versace was known, um, you know, he was known as the icon. So, yeah, of course, he had, the Medusa and the, autumn dress and blah, blah, blah. But the personal brand helped Versace build credibility and gain influence in the industry in the beginning. So, personal brand, I think, is very critical. And again, as I was mentioning before, that's what I'm doing. I build a personal brand. My personal brand helps me communicate effectively and also brings, audience and community around my agency, around my business, around my incubator, and so on and so forth. So personal brand is very important. To build a luxury business, you need to have a personal brand. And this is what I tell my clients when I'm doing their brand strategy and when they're consulting with me. One of the first thing I say is, are you a shy person? If you are, then you got to get rid of that shyness, because to build a luxury brand, you need to be the brand ambassador. You cannot delegate that to someone else. As the founder, as the person who has started the business, you need to be the brand ambassador. You need to be the face of it. And that means building your personal brand. So you need to build your personal brand. That is very critical. Okay. Next, don't be afraid to be different, right? So actually, Versace himself says, I don't believe in good taste. Okay. So Versace blazed a trail by creating risque designs, right? He emphasized the human form and celebrated human sexuality, right? He put sex appeal on the forefront. And this boldness set the brand apart. And, this is, if you look at the pattern, the Versace pattern, and their apparel, their scarves, their tableware, their pillows, and they look fantastic, right? They look different and they look bold. So in your business, don't be afraid to be bold. Again, I take the case of my agency. Now, yes, don't get me wrong, there are a ton of CEOs of agencies out there who make videos and who talk about things, but I try to be very bold. I don't care about how I sound or how I look or how I come across, because the important thing is that I need to be bold. I need to be out there, and the brand itself is bold. So think of your brand and think of how you can be bold. Think of how your brand can be bold, right? It's very important for building that kind of luxury appeal. Boldness brings luxury. All right. Let art inspire you. Okay, so in 2009, Gianni's art collection was sold for 10 million pounds, right, by Sotheby's. So in our art, we find meaning. Let art inspire you, and you're well on your way to creating designs that consumer will respond to. Okay, you might think, okay, this actually might apply to, maybe clothing companies or fashion companies or agencies, because I'm talking about design. But no, look behind me, right? Art inspires me. My office and our entire studio has art everywhere, right? Yeah, you might say, well, because you are an agency, right? No, even my incubator actually has art. And so let art inspire you. Now, not just having art at the back of your desk or whatever, or in your office. No, what I mean is let art come into whatever you're making. If you're producing a product, make art. put art into it, combine art into it. Maybe the designs, instead of being a plain, boring product, make art. If you're a service provider, then bring art into um, the design, into the environment, into your branding. Yeah, let art influence the branding. Let art influence the way your brand looks to your consumers. So that's one thing that I would recommend most of the time. Of course, be yourself. While many of Gianni's contemporaries, such as Calvin Klein and others, were creating deconstructed cuts and other things, Versace stood firm in designing per his vision. So the result is ever-increasing success during his tenure as the company's leader, right? So be yourself. And this is what I was referring to when I said that I make videos that I share. I'm myself. This is me. I don't smile much. But that's what me. It doesn't mean I'm not humorous. I'm cracking up all the time. But when I'm delivering, a message, when I'm communicating, I don't smile much, especially on videos. Now, people tell me every time, in comments when they email me, they say, fantastic video, great message, but how come you don't smile? And I say, listen, I'm focused on that message and I'm being myself, right? So be yourself. Not just in videos. I'm talking about when you're building a brand, especially a luxury brand, right? Okay. Next is Burberry. Now, Burberry, again, I will leave a link. Please just read all about this here. And again, what we can learn from Burberry also there. Let's look at actionable items, right? First, provide a consistent experience. Now, if consistency is very important, right? Not just for fashion companies, but also for any kind of business. Consistency is important, and the lack of consistency. You may have a consistent product, but if your messaging, if your communication is not consistent, then you're going to have issues because there will be a disconnect, and your target audience will not have this kind of connection. Consistency is important. So look at your product or service and then look at your messaging and say, are we consistently communicating the same thing? What is it that we're communicating, right? So sit back, and come up with that messaging first if you don't have it. But if you already have a messaging, look if it's consistent. Are you communicating the same thing on your website? If people go to your social media channels, are you communicating the same thing? Is it consistent with the message, with the brand, with the core values, with what you stand for, with what you represent, and with what your target audience core values are? Think through that, right? And rectify and fine-tune it. It's an evolutionary process. So don't write messaging on your website or on social media channels and just leave it there, right? Evaluate it. Keep fine-tuning it and tweaking it. Now, not the message itself, but the consistency of the messaging, right? The words you're using, not the core message. You cannot change the core message without really a great deal of thought or a big catalyst happening, right? Okay. Next is remember what made you successful. Okay, this might be sort of something that might be contested, right? That, like for example, Burberry has rich history, and then they use that legacy, they use that history quite a lot, and their whole brand story is based on that legacy. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not talking about their origin story all the time. So this is a big difference, and I'll do a video. Maybe I have already done it. I don't remember, but I will check and I will do a video. The difference between brand story and the origin story. Now, the origin story is about Burberry and their legacy during the World War, and how blah blah blah. But that's the origin story. But the brand story is something different. So just make sure that you don't confuse the two. So remember what made you successful and use that in your messaging. Use that legacy, use that heritage. Now, if you don't have a legacy, then you can create a legacy, but that's a separate a topic, and I will do a different video on that. Empower salespeople. Okay, this is a tricky one. Yeah, during her time at Burberry, Angela involved her salespeople in the process by creating Burberry Chat. And there's lots of other things. For example, when she went to Apple, she did a similar thing. So this is a great idea to empower your salespeople. Don't get me wrong, you need to have a script, you need to have a structure, you need to have a process, a documented process that your salespeople can then learn and utilize in their sales process, but also empower them. Empower them in a positive way, right? So if they're dealing with sales, empower them to deal with the customer as they see fit, but based on a few fundamental principles, not prescriptive steps, although they would have prescriptive steps. But then, let's say they're on a sales call, right? And they're dealing with a client, a potential client who has a unique situation, right? They don't want to buy because X, Y, Z. Now, this is something that is not in the script. This is something that the salesperson has not encountered before. But if you empower them and train them and give them the tools and the flexibility and the power to think through and make a judgment call without repercussions, without the fear that they're going to be in hot water, then they will be bold and make decisions on the spot that will get the sale, make the client happy, and also bring in revenue while not tarnishing the brand. It's a tricky one, but it needs to be thought through. Maybe that's another topic for a different video. Now I know, this is, like I said at the beginning of this video, this is a huge topic. And as we go through the different things, each one can be spun off as a different video, and I will do that when time permits. So bear with me on that. Next one is Gucci. Again, read about Gucci here, and let's look at some actionable items, right? Understand emerging markets and remain relevant. So, see, many luxury brands have struggled to connect with millennials, right? But Gucci has excelled. Because, look, what they've done is that, for example, 3 things to know about millennials is that they don't like golf as a general rule. They're not so enthused about the prospect of marriage, and they don't like companies that are overprotective of their IP, right? So this is what Gucci realized, and they've played well. They know how to communicate with the millennials. They know how to sort of tweak their messaging to align with the millennials. And this is something that you need to think through, not just millennials, right? Okay, this is just as an example, but you have to sort of look at, you have to understand emerging markets, okay? Even if you have a fantastic core market and you're servicing them and you have good sales and revenue, you know what? If you don't keep your eye on the emerging markets and trends, emerging new consumers, potential consumers, then if the tide changes for some reason or the other and your market disappears, then your brand is going to be dead in the water, right? It's going to be destroyed. And this has happened to many companies. Take the case of Nokia, for example, right? BlackBerry, not Burberry, BlackBerry, right? They did not look at this emerging market of touchscreens and things like that, and look what happened, right? They could not come back. They could not make an impact. They were leading at one time. So even executives who were the backbone of BlackBerry, who were using, touchpad, keypads on their phones, they jumped ship immediately. So keeping an eye on emerging markets is very critical. You cannot ignore that. Be different with intention. right? Don't be different just to be different. Okay, millennials call this posing, and it won't win you any loyalty, right? Now, be different with intention. For example, when Alessandro took over as Gucci's creative director, he came in with the goal of revitalizing the brand, and he succeeded, right? So he did that because he sort of took the brand in a new direction. He was moving away from the sleek. He was, introducing a dizzying array of new aesthetics and so on and so forth. So you don't have to be afraid to be different, but don't be different just for the sake of being different. Be different intentionally. Okay, this video has gone on for too long. I think it's over 20 minutes now. So I will quickly sort of summarize and complete it. We looked at 3 luxury brands and some actionable items from these luxury brands. Now, I would recommend that you read this article in its entirety, right? I wrote this article probably a year back. I don't know, it's been ages, but it is still very relevant, and it lists out the case studies of all these 3 brands. Go through those case studies, and of course you've seen the actionable items I just showed you, and go through them. If you have any questions on this topic, which is building a luxury brand, like I said, a luxury brand does not mean that you are selling a $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 product or service. You could be selling a $100 product, right? A luxury brand is a mindset. It's the mindset of the consumer. It's how they feel about your brand. If you have questions about that, drop me a line, leave a comment, or hit me up on Twitter. All right? Till the next video, take care.